All right, welcome to the next in the 67 steps, the 67-day program, one a day, rewiring your brain for success, the good life, all those things everybody wants. I'm sure you want health, wealth, love, and happiness. So today what we're going to talk about is the whisper of 10,000 generations, Dunbar's 150, and evolutionary mismatch. Your neural programming doesn't have the genetic quote-unquote memory to understand the complexity of the modern world. So one of those kind of, what's the word, complicated subjects that we can bring up is evolutionary mismatch. So if you've read Richard Dawkins, he wrote the book The Selfish Gene. He talks about this concept of evolutionary mismatch. This has been a bit controversial subject, so I'm really thinking how I want to explain this and what my goal is. The end goal is you understanding when you can go with your gut, as we have heard so much growing up. Everybody knows I like to break myths and break cliches and frameworks that don't seem to get us what we want in life that we may have been taught growing up. One of those is the truth is within, follow your gut, follow your instinct. You even hear really smart people saying that. And to a certain extent, there is truth to that. But again, the devil's in the details, and generally, generalizations, even though that is a generalization itself, generally generalizations do not hold true in all circumstances. So here's the basics of what you need to know about evolutionary mismatch. Number one, the impulses that you have, which served you at a certain point in history. Okay? Because remember, as I said, the whisper of 10,000 generations, you are not your own. I did a book about, it's called Why Beautiful People Have More Daughters. I did a review on this book. One of the interesting things in the opening of that book is where the authors say, and these two scientists say, remember, the feelings, the impulses, the memories, the instincts that you have have been passed on to you for tens of thousands of generations. Your mother, grandmother, father, grandfather, all the way back for centuries. So what worked for your great grandfather and has been passed on to you, what whispers into your ear, worked very well in the environment. But remember, the world's changed. Let me give you just the simplest example. The whispers of 10,000 generations in our head is that food will be scarce. When you find sugar, when you find fat, when you find extra energy, eat as much as you can. Okay? That's the voices in your head. 10,000 years ago, that was very important. You lived in a world where literally the average person was closer to starving to death at any moment than they were likely to be, fat. Today, of course, we have this wiring. Remember, wiring, evolution, rewiring changes very slowly. So you have basically the same brain as your great-great-great-grandfather 10,000 years ago. Now you walk into a Walmart, you walk into a grocery store, you're bombarded by food, too much energy in the form of candy, in the form of juice, in the form of just big meals, all you can eat. If you live in America, buffet meals. And what's the end result of that? Well, you follow your gut, your instinct, which is saying to you, whispering in your ear, there might not be any food tomorrow. There might not be any food tomorrow. So you gorge yourself, just like dogs do. I was reading White Fang by Jack London, the famous book. And those dogs, boy, when they got food, man, they ate every little ounce of it they could, because they would get fat and then skinny and fat and skinny, kind of like a bear, eats and then hibernates, no food. But guess what? The environment's changed. Now it's mismatched. If you read the book by Lieberman, he's the Harvard professor Daniel Lieberman. It's called The Story of the Human Body. He talks about how this evolutionary mismatch is at the root of almost every health problem we have, whether our issues with not sleeping enough in the modern world, insomnia, going to bed too late. He says we didn't evolve to be around lights all the time. The whispers in 10,000 generations is of your forefathers are be awake when it's light, go to bed when it's dark. Hadza people, one of the last hunter-gatherer tribes. They're in Africa. What do? They go to bed around 8, 9 o'clock. They sit, it gets dark. They sit around the fireplace. They go to bed. They sleep 8 to 10 hours on average. And those people, generally, of course, they have some issues when they're young of dying. But if they live past their early years, they live really long, and they don't have many of the common ailments that we have, the chronic diseases like cancer, hypertension, all these. These are all modern diseases that are coming about because we live in a mismatched situation where if we follow what's within us, it doesn't work. Again, like I said, your brain, your whispers in your head are when it's light out, when there's light, be awake. Well, what is it? How does that work in a modern world where, there's light all the time? Even your phone gives off light. Some of my best friends, they are doing things like they wear these blue blockers glasses to kind of keep the effect of light. Let me see if I can find this very important kind of quote here. Yeah, I'll come back to it, by Lieberman. So, physically, if you're searching for the good life, the whispers of 10,000 generations seem to be on your side. And in some situations, they are. Let me give you an example. You're walking across the street, a voice in your subconscious says, jump out of the way. Maybe there's a rumbling. You don't have time to use your conscious logical brain, use algebra. You just jump out of the way, and a car doesn't hit you, and you survive. Those instinctual moments like that, the whispers of 10,000 generations in your head can serve you well. But just understand, we've thrown so many wrenches into the machine of life that you're going to have to carefully go, when can I, or understand, this is the time I can go with my gut, this is the time I can't. This is the time I can listen to my instincts, these are the times that I can't. So health, wealth. Traditionally, you and I, as humans, have not lived that long, right? Depending on when you look at history, people lived into the early to mid to late 20s. Different times they lived 30s and 40s. But the rate that which you live right now is fairly unprecedented. And that's I'm over generalizing, I know. But point being, to a certain extent, we are not financially hardwired to save money. In the past, it's been the voices of 10,000 generations are like, eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we die. So what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to go, I'm going to bypass the evolutionary mismatch that wants me to just spend everything I earn. And I'm going to have to you're going to have to focus on saving. And it's going to take extraordinary effort, just like it's going to take extraordinary effort not to drink soda, which is going to taste good. And remember, going back to this physical evolutionary mismatch, sugar was rarely found, except when they really found honeybees. That's about the only time most of your ancestors ever got a bunch of sugar all at once, because fruit, before domestication and hybridizing of modern apples and things, it wasn't that sweet. It was more like a carrot. So this really sweet is something we've always craved, because the sweet represents a ready source of sugar, which feeds our brains. And humans, your ancestors had big brains, just like you and I have. So just like sugar, you're going to have to override your instinct to rush out and eat all the sugar you can, all the fat you can, all the salt you can. There's a good book, an amazing book I recommend called Salt, Sugar, Fat by the Pulitzer Prize winning author Michael Moss, I think his name is. He again talks about how the modern food system is just programming. I mean, they have scientists just there. Scientists there going, how can we make food, manipulate the mouthfeel so that when you eat one Pringle chip or one cheesy something, that the fat, sugar, and salt so hits you that it overrides your instinct to go, no, this isn't healthy to me. It hits you at the evolutionary level, the 10,000 generations, and it overrides what you know is good for you. And again, that's the root of, basically, according to Lieberman, almost every chronic health issue that you can name, not only in the United States, but around the world. Obesity. I think I read for the first time in history, there's more children overweight than there are undernourished. You see, we're going to go from one health crisis in the past to another health crisis. It's out of the fire into the frying pan. So for you, physically, you're going to have to do this, as I began to talk about. Financially, your brain's not wired to save money. That's why here in the United States, I think about 1%. The savings rate is about 1 or 2%. It's abysmal. People save about $2 for every $100 they make. It's a big issue. It's going to be an issue for you. I don't want it to be an issue. I want you to overcome this issue. And the simplest way, as Alan Nation, my mentor, said, to overcome any problem, the simplest way is to understand why it is. Literally, half the battle of fixing these things we're talking about is just understanding that's how it is. Oh, that's why it is. We're getting to the root today. So with wealth, this is going to be your biggest one. There's other things financially, but I could tell you the investor mentality that wealthy people have, whether it be Bill Gates, being able to take, he said from age 20 to age 30, I never took a day off. See, that's an investor mentality. Instead of enjoying his 20s, quote unquote, like most people do, like we're in some ways hardwired to, because we used to not live much past our 20s. You had to reproduce then. You had to focus on romance and all this to have kids. Well, he took 10 years off from that, and that made him one of the wealthiest people in the world. Not the only thing, but it's definitely probably causation. When it comes to your finances, you're going to have to go from a consumer to an investor / saver. And someone who does that is going against the whisper of 10,000 generations in many ways. So I want you to start getting good and start developing this skill to go, I want to do this. What was within me, in my head and in my quote unquote, my gut, doesn't always serve me well. When it comes to love, we see this same issue. In a modern world, like Barry Schwartz talks about the paradox of choice. And I've been a victim of this, and maybe you have. I don't know if you're single or not, but if you haven't, you'll know people who are. We're programmed, as I talked about, this Dunbar's number. Let's talk about that. Robin Dunbar was a famous, or is a famous anthropologist, sociologist, who came up with this concept of Dunbar's number, which said, we evolved to be in relatively small groups. The whispered 10,000 generations, most of your ancestors, okay, they spent time in rather small villages, 100, 150 people on average. Remember, the world's become very urban very recently. I read something like, 100 years ago, 90% of the world lived in small, either on a farm or in rural areas, and 10% lived in big cities. Now, in our time, it's reversed. About 90% of people live in large cities, far away from where they may have grown up in. So, socially, when it comes to the third part of the good life, remember health, wealth, we've talked about health and wealth. Now we're on love, which represents family, friends, and romance. Robin Dunbar said we're programmed to be in these groups of 150. But what's happened now, because of modern technology, you can live anywhere. You can get on a plane. I lived with the Amish for 2.5 years, and I learned there. An Amish guy was asked, why don't they use airplanes? And he said, well, the second we use airplanes, we'll all live far apart. So modern transportation, as I've said before, technology, I'm not anti-technology. I'm not pro-technology. Technology to me is just Newton's third law. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. You choose the reaction you want. Every piece of technology you bring into your life, the reason you want it is it's action. It's a force on your life. Just understand, unintended consequences can be a beast. They can be a beast, and we often forget that there are unintended consequences. So I'm not telling you I'm not a Luddite and I'm not pro-technology. The Amish had a point, and you and I have a point. The world we live in, we tend to move away from our families. Sometimes that's probably good. Some people have horrible families. Many people do. My great-grandfather was a psychoanalyst, and he used to tell my grandma a lot of times the worst thing for children is their parents. Not always, but hopefully you had good parents, but many people haven't. So being able to move apart and not being, stuck where you're born, quote unquote stuck, has its pros and cons. In history, traditionally, and still statistically, Dr. Martina Adshade talks about this, the healthiest marriages are people who have known each other, childhood friends. But yet you and I move away so often, or there are no childhood friends that you really grow up with as much anymore. So the whisper of 10,000 generations is like, marry someone you trust, but the modern world, it's not always a possibility, right? So that's an issue. I brought my laptop down here. I'm gonna plug this phone in because I want to see if I can download. Actually, I'll put it all up on my computer. Let me read a little bit of this to you guys because it's put so well. By the way, if you haven't read, one of the books that I want you to read from this is The Story of the Human Body by Daniel E. Lieberman. Let me read you some notes. He says, for example, going back to the health, sleeping. People today suffer from insomnia because they experience more stress from some mix of physical and psychological factors. It is also possible that the unusual stimulus-free environments in which we now like to sleep further promote insomnia. Falling asleep is a gradual process, but he said perhaps insomnia sometimes occurs because by isolating ourselves in insulated bedrooms, we don't hear evolutionarily normal sounds such as the fireplace crackling, people snoring, and hyenas barking far in the distance, reassuring subconscious parts of the brain that everything's okay. So simple things like that, like we sleep in bedrooms that are quiet now, but the whispers of 10,000 generations may not have wired us that well. So in some ways you're going to learn as we talk about this, sometimes the answer is going to be go back to some old school stuff, some traditional stuff. I talk about this in Toughening Up. I talk about once a week, go to bed super early. Go to bed when the sun goes down. It's hard to do all the time, but as Joe Salton always said, nature laughs last. To the extent that you cannot fight nature, the wiring of our brains is not going to change a lot. No matter how many lights come on, no matter how many candy bars and how much fast food gets put out, doesn't mean your body can handle it. Doesn't mean your subconscious and your psyche and your brain can handle those stressors and environmental changes. So going back to love, many people now feel lonely. And they think it's something wrong with them, and they got to learn this social. But I'm saying it's just evolutionary mismatch. You see, you're not supposed to have to do those things that we now have to do. Build social skills where you can make friends in adulthood. See, in adulthood, traditionally, the way your brain is wired is you've been friends with, you're hanging out with guys and girls that you've known for 20 years. Now in the world, we split them up, and adults have a hard time making friends. They usually say after college is the last time people in the modern world really are able to make friends, right? So for you, if you're older, you feel a little isolated. Sometimes what I do, I believe, once again, once I understand evolutionary mismatch, I know how to solve it properly. So many people identify problems, but because they are afraid to get the true answer as to why it is like it is, they come up with an incorrect solution. See, most people identify the problem correctly. People in the modern world feel lonely, feel isolated, and they go, well, that's because there's something wrong with us now, or that's because people are bad now. Now, people are the same that they've been 1,000 years ago. People were doing the same things that you may or may not like them doing to you now. That hasn't changed. What's changed is evolutionarily, you and I, Robin Dunbar, we grew up with 150 core people that become our life. So for you, like in my companies, in my friendship, I'm big on old friends. An Amish guy, William Mitzi, told me new friends are good, but old friends are better. Hillary Clinton talks about in her book an old Girl Scout saying, I forget how it was. It was something like, find new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other is gold. So in my companies, Jeremy works for me. We've been friends since we're 2 years old. A lot of my friends, I try to find my old friends and I'm like, hey, move to California. Let's work together, because I understand the true bonds of friendship. As Jonathan Haidt told me on the phone, the 3-time TED Talk speaker, the NYU professor, and the professor of happiness hypothesis, the author of happiness hypothesis, he said, Ty, we need people that we have what's called companionative love, and that comes from going through adversity together, and that generally comes from older friends. Even when it comes to marriage, if you can find a man or a woman you've known for a long time, statistically, that's one of the best bets for romantic relationships. And of course, this applies to family too. So maybe, I read somewhere that, I think it was, was it Lieberman? It was, forget who it was, Kahneman, thank you, the Nobel Prize guy. He talked about what makes us happy, and he said people who use money to fly in old friends, they use money in ways that makes them happier. So if you come into some money, as you gain financial independence, prosperity, wealth, and impact, you can use that to bring in and start harmonizing your life with the hardwiring of your brain, harmonizing with this whisper of 10,000 generations. So, and then when it comes to this fourth thing, this happiness issue, okay? So I called this, Whisper of 10,000 Generation, Dunbar's 150, an evolutionary mismatch. Your neural programming doesn't have the memory to understand the complexity of the water world. You may not feel as happy or as fulfilled because we know those things that make us happy and fulfilled. It's a certain level of financial stability, as Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner, talked about. Modern world, he felt that was around, or his research showed around 80 to 120,000. Well, to get to that level, you're going to have to become an investor, both doubling down on your own brain, foregoing the present. We talked about this in Stoic versus Epicurean, toughening up a little bit, not always living YOLO for the moment, even though understanding the voices of 10,000 generations are often going to say to you, no, just consume today, because tomorrow we don't know what's going to happen. You're going to have to override that. Build some financial stability. Invest in your brain. Invest money in your savings account. We're going to talk about that. You got to have, as John Wooden said, prepare for a rainy day, because rainy days come. If you don't have that, Kahneman says you will be less happy and fulfilled. You need some money. I was reading this book, Top Dog, talks about this. How money is important, and it is a motivator, even though some people think they are not motivated by money. This book, The Power of Others, I came across. Amazing book, talking again about we are these hive creatures, right? So financially, you have to get your house in order to get that fourth pillar, happiness and fulfillment. You have to do the same thing when it comes to love. I talked about this in one of my podcasts or whatever. I was saying, look, so many people, okay, are thinking that they are going to be happy like a man is an island. Remember the saying, no man, no woman is an island. This book talks about it. Let me see if I can find here what it says. I highly recommend this book. It's made the cut. It says, the presence of others can lead us astray, but their absence can propel us to far worse places. It says, where is it? Now we'll find. Oh yeah, they noticed and researched, Christakis and James Fowler, social scientists. Happy people were clustered together, meaning they were more likely to be friends with each other. Christakis explained, most people will not be surprised that people with more friends are happier. So you need a certain volume of social interaction. I talk about this in evolution, in Civilization It's Discontents, my favorite Freud book, amazing essay by Freud. He says, people, as they try to get happy, some people get so much pain from past betrayal, past nightmares in friend, family, romance relationships that they withdraw like a monk or a hermit. And, Freud says, you to a certain extent that might be helpful, but it's probably not what you think. Let's see where he says here. They talk about how you're going to need people. It's an amazing line. Let's see. It says, it feels like we're in the driving seat in our daily lives, making decisions autonomously, experience emotions that we ourselves generate, choosing what we believe in and what we don't. Mostly, this is an illusion. 4 decades of research into how people decide to do what they do has shown that we are highly susceptible to the winds of social influence. Indeed, it is impossible to escape them short of living in hermitic isolation as a hermit. And even that might not immunize us. So, a lot of science is showing to get happiness, you're going to have to get pillar number 2 and 3 in order in your life. And the best way to get in order is to understand the boundaries that have been set. Like I said, old friends are better. I highly encourage you to go back, revive old friendships that you had from any age, 1 year old, 2 years old. One of my best friends, Joe, we've known each other since we were 2. I tend to be a pretty happy person, and I wondered why I'm so happy, and I think I just got lucky. I stumbled upon this without knowing, always keeping my old friends, always keeping in touch with family. My family, my dad was married a few times, so I've got a lot of half-brothers and sisters, and keeping up with them. Friends, family, romance. The whispers of 10,000 generations is going to continually tell you that you need friends, but the environment's changed. You need old friends. And even in romance, you need old connections. And the modern world is at war with you. Not on purpose. It's not a conspiracy. I don't believe in Illuminati things. I don't think it's... what's the conspiracy? You and I are part of it. If there is a conspiracy, you and I are part of it. Right? So, again, as you go through the book reading list, as you're learning that, I want you to particularly pay attention to issues of mismatch, evolutionary mismatch. So the books that I have for you to read in the recommended book list on health, pay attention to those health books, because those health books, oftentimes the ones I select, like Salt, Sugar, Fat, like the Story of the Human Body, I'm picking books because we know the modern science is in. This is your biggest barrier to get in the good life. It's not what you think. Most people are too busy blaming bankers, the economy, recession, the Illuminati, their parents, their own willpower being weak, and they don't realize what's actually happened is a coalescence of multiple factors kind of just falling into place at once, which give us the potential to have an amazing life in the modern world. But when we're not careful, also gives us the chance to sabotage every part of our life. So how I envision your life and my life going forward from this program in order to live out what we want, right, is us continually, not on a daily basis, but on overall, weekly, monthly, examining our lives, find the things that we can change, like the old, what's that old saying, that old prayer? God, give me the, the courage to change the things that I can, the patience to accept the things that I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? I think that's appropriate here. You must know those things you cannot change. One of those things you cannot change is, for example, physically, the love of sugar, salt, and fat. So you can't keep your kitchen stocked with Pringles and Skittles and then expect your willpower to overcome it. No. It's too many whispers of 10,000 generations saying, eat that extra fat. So one of the things that I do that really helps me, don't eat out that much. Eating out, man, remember, those restaurants want your money, all of them, even the supposedly healthy ones. They want profit. They're corporations generally. And even if they're not, they want people to come back. So they generally, almost all of them, feed food that's not in your best interest. So cook at home. Once or twice a week, eat out at the most. The average person eats like four meals a week at a fast food. That can't be you. Not if you want the good life, man. You can't do it. So that's one of those ones where you have to know willpower is not going to hold it out, and have the wisdom to know you can't change that one. Sleep. You're going to have to know that you're going to have to put yourself in some environments. So what I like to do, some simple things, get a noise machine. They make them. I got a little noise machine. They got apps on your phone. Make your room dark. Once in a while, go to bed at dusk. Or, go to bed when the sun goes down, an hour after. Once in a while, turn off all the lights in your house. If you got a fireplace, bring some candles, bring some fireplace. Go back to your roots. Nothing wrong with that. I know you can't do it every day, but nature laughs last. So don't fight it every day of the rest of your life, okay? So when it comes to finances, again, do something. Maybe one of the best things I've seen is set up an automated savings plan. If you work at a corporation, a 401k, if you're an entrepreneur, some automatic deductions, because we know it's not in our wiring to want to save. So evolutionary mismatch, if you try to fight it and say it's not there and you're going to win with willpower, no, you're not. Nature is going to override. When it comes to happiness, don't start go. I see this a lot. How can I be more social? I just moved to a new town. How can I make new friends and everything's amazing? Well, there's so many books out there about how to do that. And a lot of it's BS. I like to call BS when it's B. I don't like to call BS, but it is. Revive old friendships, my friend. Can't believe nobody talks about this. You bring me your list of everything on social, I'm going to blow it all away with hardwiring science, which says companionative love. You had to have gone through adversity together. That's why people go to war together, often become friends for life, and they have a special bond, sometimes even more powerful than family or spouses. The love, that if you've seen that, I think it's Steven Spielberg did that HBO series, Band of Brothers. That's powerful. You see these people go through adversity together. In general, to have adversity, to create this companionative love, which is hardwired into our brain, which makes you feel happy, you need to have a long time with people. And the good news is, with Facebook, with Twitter, with phones, all these are new things. You can use technology to your advantage and reach out and find old people, friends. You need employees? Go back to your old friends. I did it. It's one of the greatest experiments I did. Again, I don't know why nobody talks about this stuff. Sometimes I feel like, I'm not dumb. I've always been a kind of smart guy, but I'm not this smart that I'm the only person in the world talking about this stuff, really. But hey, it's a crazy world. Now you know. Me and you will know it together. Try it during these 67 days. Reach out to old friends, to old teachers, old family members you haven't talked to. Now, let me just say, caveat, as this book says, if you hang out, don't pick the bad ones. So just because they are old friends or old family or a girl or a guy you've known does not automatically qualify them for friendship, romance, or, family, close ties. Pick the ones that are good, good as defined, the people going on the same track as you, people that won't hold you back from this good life track that we're all on in the 67 steps, okay? Absolutely vital. Absolutely vital. This is one of those talks that I'm doing here, this 67 steps, that really, of course, as I said, these all work together congruently, and you can't take one over the other. But if you don't understand this, you're not going to understand a lot of the things that I talk about. Other common areas. So, interesting. Books. And you guys know I'm so big on books. Some of you will struggle with reading a lot of books. So evolutionary mismatch, we didn't really evolve to read. Okay? Some people, I grew up around it. I believe my hardwire in my brain was kind of shaped by that. That might not be you. You don't have to fight it and feel guilty. Use audiobooks. Use YouTube. Use in-person mentors. The reason I like books, obviously, is you can get access to, the greatest mentors who you might not be able to meet in person. But technology is a double-edged sword, and that's the good news. It's harmed us in many ways, but it's provided for us. When it comes to food, it's put the worst food in front of our face, the most tempting things, sugar, salt, fat. But it's also given us the ability to grow. When I was at Joel Salatin's, he's growing some of the best food. You can get grass-fed food, and you can get berries from around the world, and you can get this, that, and the other thing, and you can get them using technology. So make technology your slave. You don't be the slave of technology. So when it comes to finances, that's why I said you could set up now bank automatic withdrawals. Won't even know it's there to help you save. When it comes to friendship, I said you could use Facebook and all this stuff. It's awesome. You can use a sound machine. You can use darkening technology. There's so many things. There's special grounding mattress, like magnet mattresses that kind of you put under where you sleep, and it replicates more sleeping on the ground, which we came up with. So once again, there is no conspiracy. There's a lot of things on your side these days. And the beauty of what I love about the modern world is even though we have the whisper of 10,000 generations, we still have control. And we may have more control than we've ever had in history. Now, one other important part of Whisper of 10,000 Generations. I want you to use this, as we talked about earlier, about Sam Walton's humility, one of the first 67 steps. I want you to begin to see what we're talking about, evolutionary mismatch, and the Whisper of 10,000 Generations, and Dunbar's 150. I want you to really use that as a humbling effect. As I talked about, the Amish teach their children, and when I lived there for 2.5 years, I found that they talked about Gelassenheit. It's a German word. It doesn't really translate in English, but it really means giving up or humbling yourself or bowing your knee to God. They're Christians. You may not be religious. You might be an atheist. Replace the word God with nature or the universe. You must bow your knee, all of us humans, to forces larger than ourselves. Even Jeff Bezos, where he talks about, they talk about Jeff Bezos and the everything store, made $38 billion, but he said it's one thing he doesn't argue about. He likes to break the rules, but he says he can't break the laws of physics. And physics are related to biology, right? Physical cells and neurons in your brain. You can't fight it, so bend your knee. This level of humility will give you two things. You're more likely to get what you want. Number two, it gives you some rules to follow. And we all do better with rules. Think about even in competition. In this book, Top Dog by Poe Bronson and Ashley Merriman, an amazing book, they talk about the best competitions need some rules. Without it, competition, their theory is that competition brings out the best performance in most people, okay? They talk about Ovid, the Greek poet, who basically said, thousands of years ago, there's no horse that runs so fast as a horse that's competing against another one, right? That's a paraphrase. Point being, you will probably do better in competition, but you need rules. So this Whisper 10,000 Generation is part of the rules. You understanding there are rules. You're not going to overcome them through willpower, okay? There are rules about the kind of foods you can have around you, the kind of temptations. There are rules that if you always have lights on in your house and you never shut them off early, you're going to stay awake too late. You're going to stress your body, increase cortisol, increase your fat that you retain, increase the likelihood you're going to have various chronic diseases that come along with those states that you don't want to be in. You're going to be financially, if you keep the TV on and you're always listening to consumer-driven advertising, we see 2,000 ads a day. that you're going to spend money and not be an investor, which means you're not going to get financial independence, which means you're going to be less happy. It all works together. It can either work together for you. That's what I say. And you don't know when you're playing poker, and after 30 minutes, you don't know who the sucker is. You're the sucker in the room. In the modern world, if you're not careful, you will become the sucker financially. Okay? You can't just use, when it comes to love and friendships, you can't just use going out networking to make solid friendships. I'm not saying you shouldn't make new friends. As the saying goes, new friends are good, but old friends are better. Okay? You can't replicate 10 or 20 years of experiential friendship. So rekindle those. Bow your knee to the laws and the rules. Nobody, you or I, are going to really mess with those rules. They say, I've read varying reports, but your DNA changes at the rate of 1% per 10,000 years. That means even if you could live another 10,000 years, you'd basically have the same, within 98% of the same genes as people had in the BC 10,000 years ago. You're not going to change much. You're definitely not going to change on the 50, 60, 70, 80 more years you may have here on Earth. So you better bow your knee to those voices of 10,000 generations, yet don't completely be the slave of them. Harness them. You know, when I was on a farm, I was on an Amish community I live with. They didn't all live together, but they lived within a few miles of each other. I lived on a farm. There's 950 horses. And I learned one thing about horses, man. It's kind of like a pit bull. You get these stallion horses that are just powerful and strong. David Chupp used to have one named Prince. Man, this horse was impressive. It was like not a Clydesdale, it was a Belgian, but similar like you see on the beer commercials, the huge horses that can pull wagons. You're talking a 2,000, 2,200 pound horse, and that thing was controlled by a bridle right here. But boy, I'll never forget, I was in Ohio on a farm with David Klein, and he handed me the reins, these reins, and there were 10 horses hitched together. And they were pulling a wagon I was on, and I said, "Giddy up." And man, when those things pulled, it was like, wow. And I've had fancy cars, Maserati, Ferrari, all this, and those are cool when they just pull off, but it was still not as cool a feeling as those. 10 horses, all controlled. It's kind of like having a Rottweiler, like you hold that thing. And those 10 horses, as long as you have them under control, boy, you get a lot of work done, and they work for you. But I've had horses run away on me, and then it's all reverse. And those 10 horses can bring you death and destruction faster than anything. 100 years ago, the number one killer, or the number one or number two killer of humans was horses and bulls, dairy bulls. These powerful things could turn on you. A Rottweiler could be your best friend. If you're a robber comes in your house, boy, you're happy to have that Rottweiler. But if you're not careful, and that Rottweiler turns on you, it can be your worst nightmare. That's how your evolutionary urges, impulses, the whisper of 10,000 generations. Get those under control so they're like you have power. And if you control these, you'll have more power than the average person that you run into. If you don't, it'll be a quick path down, and it won't be, maybe to death, or maybe to just not a good life, to the extent you control these. And you want you to begin to become aware, watching people as they eat food. Man, they're being controlled. They're not the master, they're the slave. Watch people financially. That's not the master, that's the slave. Socially, romantically, they're not the master, they're the slave. You want to be the master of those impulses. So, I want to leave you with this question to close out this lesson. What area, specifically, you can talk about a health one, financial one, a social one related to your happiness. Before I do that, one thing on happiness. One of the things that makes you happy is contributing to something bigger than you, okay? Whether that be a religion, church, something charity, altruistic, a tribe of people, a movement. You see people getting into CrossFit or getting into organic food or whatever, some way that we kind of bring ourselves into these groups. And you need that. That's part of the part of the healthy part of our 10,000 generations, whispers of 10,000 generations, where it becomes unhealthy, okay? is when you aren't part of anything. B, it's very easy in the modern world because we have so much convenience. Joel Salatin used to say, one thing he wasn't Amish, but he said one thing I like about the Amish is they set up their lives without technology so that they have to rely on their neighbors. They have to. Your house is built for you by a friend. When you need a barn, when your harness on your horse, on the saddle, or when your kid's sick, it's all, you go to someone else that's in your group. But modern convenience has made it to you don't need anybody. You don't need a friend to help you when you're sick, because you can call a doctor, an anonymous doctor at a hospital. You don't need, if you need something, some clothes made or this, that, we've made ourselves not interlocking. And when you do that and make yourself not vulnerable, again, the voices of 10,000 generations will say, am I in an interlocking web? No, then I'm not going to feel good. I'm going to have low-lying levels of depression to try to push that person back into an interlocking group. So a lot of us are trying to fight that. We feel depressed. We don't feel fulfilled. We don't feel happy. And we're like, there's something wrong with us. No, it's the environmental changes that we have to make. So you need to be part of something big. Get into this, 67 Steps program. Start replying back to the comments to the other people in this program. That's why I built this socially, because there's a tremendous being part of a like-minded group of people. Go on my Facebook, my Instagram, talk to people in my YouTube, comment back and forth, find people that are like-minded, join a movement. Maybe you have another interest. Maybe you have a charity that interests you, going to church or temple or whatever, whatever it is that is your thing, okay? Within reason, I think it's fine. And bow your knee, Gelassenheit, to this need in your brain. You're not going to fix it with willpower and just go, I want to be happy, I want to be happy. Happiness comes by doing other things right, by making the soup of your life. You can't just have chicken, you can't just have noodles, you can't just have broth. You need them all mixed together to have a good chicken noodle soup, right? The broth, or should I say the soup of life, the soup of the good life. So which of these 4 areas, health, wealth, love, or happiness, leave us a comment here on the page, okay? Write this in your journal, 2 places. Some of you were asking, those journals that you're writing out, if you feel comfortable, you can email them to me. You can take a picture of them and email them to ty@tylopez.com. I do look at them. Can't answer all of them, but if you don't have time, or if you feel private about that, that's fine. Put a public thing here to interact with others right below the video here, or the audio video, and then write this pen and paper on your journal. What area of the 4 is a specific area where the whisper of 10,000 generations is not working in your favor, and how can you change it? For some of you, it's going to be some physical stuff you're going to do, we talked about. Change how you sleep, change the food you're eating, so on. For some of you, it's financial, becoming more of an investor, not being tricked into being for the moment. For some of you, it's love, rekindling old friendships, old romances, old family connections. For others of you, it's interlocking into a bigger group, a cause, a mission, bigger than yourself. What is that? Leave that. So I hope this has been helpful. It's absolutely vital that you understand this. It's integral to this 67 steps. So thank you so much. Leave the comment to close out this lesson, and I will see you on the next one.